My name is David Langston. I'm 38 years old. I work as a systems engineer in Atlanta, and I've always lived a quiet life. Hard-working, dependable, the type of guy who doesn't ask for much. I married my college sweetheart Elise 10 years ago. We were raising two beautiful twins, Ava and Micah, both 4 years old. I never imagined that the people who gave me life would be the same ones who would abandon mine when I needed them most. It happened on a rainy Sunday evening. Elise and I were driving home after visiting her sister's place in Marietta. The roads were slick, and a speeding driver ran a red light. The crash was violent. I blacked out. When I came to in the hospital, the pain in my body was nothing compared to the terror of not seeing Elise beside me. They told me she was in a coma. I had fractured ribs, a shattered leg, and nerve damage in my left arm. I couldn't move, let alone care for my children. My first thought was of the twins. I asked the nurse to call my parents. They lived just 30 minutes away. My voice shook as I begged them over the phone to please pick up Ava and Micah from Elise's sister, just for a few days while I was in the ICU. My mother sighed and said, "David, we raised our kids. We're not babysitters now." I thought she was joking. But then she added something I'll never forget. "You're becoming a burden, and we had plans tonight." They were on their way to a concert. In that moment, something inside me went cold. Not angry, cold, like the final click of a lock turning for the last time. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I thanked them, hung up, and stared at the ceiling until the morphine took me under again. My children were eventually brought to the hospital by Elise's sister, who cancelled her own trip abroad, just to help us. She held my hand and said, "David, I don't know what kind of parents could do something like that." The betrayal wasn't loud or violent. It was quiet, subtle, a refusal, a dismissal, a disappearing act. I had grown up believing that family meant you don't leave each other behind, but in that moment I understood that sometimes the deepest wounds come not from strangers, but from those who share your last name. And it wasn't just about the accident, it was about everything I hadn't wanted to see before. As I lay in that hospital bed, broken and grieving, I made a silent vow. I wouldn't confront them. I wouldn't explain myself or ask for anything again, but I would remember. I would rebuild, and I would make sure they understood, without me ever having to raise my voice, that walking away from me and my children was the biggest mistake of their lives. Lying in that hospital bed gave me a lot of time to think. It's strange how pain rearranges your priorities. The body heals slowly, but the mind replays everything like a broken record. I started remembering all the subtle signs I had ignored for years, the way my parents never showed up to Ava and Micah's birthdays, always had excuses for missing holidays, and constantly reminded me how much they sacrificed just to raise me. I used to defend them. I used to say they're just tired, or they didn't mean it like that. But now I saw it for what it was. Emotional distance disguised as boundaries. The truth was, I had spent my entire adulthood trying to earn a kind of love from them that was always conditional. As a child, I got straight A's to make them proud. As a teenager, I avoided rebellion to win their approval. And as a man, I bent myself into a quieter version of who I really was, just so they wouldn't call me ungrateful. But all it took was one moment, one emergency for their mask to drop completely. Their comfort mattered more than their grandchildren's safety. That told me everything I needed to know. The hardest part wasn't what they did. It was what Elise would never get to process. She remained in a coma for 12 days. I remember holding her hand, whispering to her through cracked lips, telling her that I'd protect our children with everything I had left. I told her not to worry, even though my heart was breaking. When she finally woke up, She cried, not for herself but because she asked, "Where are the kids?" That was Elise in one sentence. Always putting someone else first. I didn't tell her about my parents right away. I let her focus on her recovery. But every time my phone buzzed with a text from them offering hollow updates about their travels, photos from a jazz lounge, or vague questions like "Hope you're doing better," I felt something inside me recoil. They had no idea what I had seen, what I had felt. They thought their absence could be patched over with politeness. I let them keep thinking that. I began to withdraw. No updates, no replies. When they finally asked if they could visit the twins, I told them politely, "We're focusing on healing right now. Maybe later." The truth is, I didn't want them near my children. Not after what they did. Not after what they chose. The real grief came in waves. Grief over the parents I thought I had, and the family I thought we were. But beneath the grief, a quiet resolve began to form. I wouldn't let bitterness infect my heart. I had something far more powerful than anger. Clarity, the kind of clarity that doesn't scream or fight. It just observes and waits. I didn't need revenge. I needed distance, and in that distance, something powerful began to grow. As Elise began her slow recovery, I quietly reorganized our lives. I took an extended leave from work, restructured our finances, and brought in a part-time caregiver to help with the twins, while Elise regained her strength. Elise's sister moved in for a few weeks to support us, and during that time I found myself staring into silence most nights. Calculating not revenge, but boundaries. What would a life without their weight feel like? I didn't block my parents. I didn't send them any angry letters or list what they'd done wrong. I just made myself unavailable. They reached out twice more, once to tell me they were going on a cruise, and once to ask if I had seen the watch my father misplaced during his last visit. That was it. No. "How are the kids?" "No, do you need help?" Just superficial noise, thrown into a void they thought I still stood in. But I had quietly moved out of it. One afternoon, while sorting through old documents in our home office, I came across a dusty lockbox my parents had asked me to store years ago. It had always sat on the bottom shelf, beneath family albums and old manuals. I had forgotten it even existed. Curiosity overruled hesitation. Inside were papers, property records, tax filings, and something unexpected, a copy of a deed, with my name listed as a co-owner of their second property in Savannah. A vacation house I'd only ever seen once. I blinked in disbelief. I remembered the story, how they had added my name during a refinance years ago, for legal convenience. At the time I hadn't thought much of it, but now it gave me leverage. They didn't even realize they had handed me. The property wasn't just co-owned. It was titled in such a way that any major decision, including selling, refinancing, or renting it, required my legal consent. And according to the paperwork, they had recently tried to list it on Airbnb without filing the proper notices. I didn't rush. I made copies, spoke to a real estate attorney, and began learning every clause tied to that deed. And what I found was clear. Without my written consent, the short-term rental income they had been collecting could be challenged. Legally, I could freeze activity on the house. But more than that, I could finally shift the balance, not to hurt them, but to show them who they dismissed so easily. I still didn't say a word to them. Not yet. Silence had become my sharpest tool. I let them keep thinking they were operating with full control. I wanted them to taste what it felt like when someone they underestimated, someone they called a burden, suddenly became the one holding the key. Weeks passed before the first sign of disruption reached them. It came in the form of a politely worded letter from my attorney, informing them of an ownership dispute concerning the Savannah property. The letter didn't accuse, It didn't threaten, it simply stated the facts, that I had legal standing, that the property was under review, and that any short-term rental activity should cease until the matter was resolved. It was a pin dropped in still water, but the ripples were immediate. My mother called the next day. I didn't pick up. She left a message, confused, panicked, her voice shifting from concern to condescension in under a minute. "David, I don't know what this nonsense is, but it needs to stop. This is causing us unnecessary stress." Then my father called once, twice, then emailed. They had built a passive income stream from that house. They were relying on that money, and now, because of their own arrogance, they couldn't touch it. Elise watched all of this unfold quietly. When I finally told her what I'd discovered, she sat back in her chair, one hand still resting on her healing ribs, and said, "You didn't have to do that. But I'm glad you did. We didn't gloat. We didn't celebrate. There was nothing joyful about it. Only the quiet satisfaction of justice served on a plate colder than any grudge. I had simply pressed pause on something they never imagined I could reach. They tried to reason with me. My mother even tried the guilt tactic. We're family, David. You're punishing us for one mistake." But it wasn't one mistake. It was a lifetime of selective love, culminating in the moment they walked away from their son and his children when we were most vulnerable. I didn't owe them the comfort of pretending otherwise. Then came the final attempt. They showed up unannounced, pulled into our driveway like nothing had happened. Elise answered the door, her body still frail but her eyes clear. She told them we weren't receiving visitors. My father grew indignant. My mother cried. Elise didn't flinch. She closed the door with the gentleness of someone who had nothing left to prove. And just like that, the illusion shattered. They didn't try again after that.
I think they finally understood not just that I had boundaries now, but that I had discovered something they never anticipated.
I didn't need them. And without control, they had no power left to wield. I had taken back every inch of ground they thought they still stood on, without ever raising my voice. After that final visit, the silence became mutual. They stopped calling. I stopped wondering if they ever would again. The property remained frozen, untouched. According to my attorney, they'd attempted to negotiate with their property manager and even tried to sell it off under the radar, only to be blocked by my legal signature requirement. Every move they made ended in a closed door they couldn't unlock without me. And yet, I didn't pursue a single dollar from it. I didn't take them to court. I didn't demand compensation for what they did. I just held the keys. That was enough. That was everything. Watching them finally confront the reality of consequences. Not because I shouted, but because I quietly stood in my own authority, was the closure I didn't know I needed. I began to heal in deeper ways. Elise and I spent more time in the backyard with the twins, laughing under the sun, playing board games on the porch. Our home no longer carried the weight of trying to prove anything to anyone. I noticed how much lighter I felt, not because of what I'd done, but because of what I'd let go of, the belief that I had to earn love from people who only knew how to withhold it. They sent one final email. It was short. My father wrote, "We're sorry if we hurt you. We never meant for things to go this far. If you ever want to talk, we're here." No apology, no ownership, just the soft echo of regret bouncing off a wall too far gone to climb. I didn't reply, not out of cruelty, but because some silences are sacred. Some distances are not punishment, they're protection. The Savannah house still sits there, empty, untouched. I haven't decided what to do with it, but I keep the deed safe. Not for revenge, but as a quiet reminder, a symbol that even when you are broken, even when others turn away, you still have power, especially when you choose not to wield it in anger. Sometimes the deepest form of justice is peace. And peace, I learned, is not passive. It's the result of walking away without bitterness, of building something beautiful after others refused to help you stand. I didn't destroy them. I didn't have to. I just chose to live. And that, in the end, was the loudest thing I ever did. It's been over a year since the accident. Elise is walking again, slower than before, but steadier with every step. Ava and Micah are starting school soon, and they're learning what it means to be loved without conditions. Our house feels fuller now, not because of more people, but because of more truth. We don't pretend, we don't force relationships that hurt us. We don't let anyone call us a burden again, not even in silence.
I think often about legacy. Not the one my parents tried to pass down through guilt, but the one I'm building with my children. They won't grow up confused about who has their back. They'll know what it looks like to stand for yourself, without violence, to respond to betrayal not with revenge but with wisdom. One day when they're older, I'll tell them the full story, not to poison their hearts, but to teach them what boundaries are worth.
Sometimes people ask if I ever miss my parents, and the answer is complicated. I miss the idea of them, the version I once believed in. But I don't miss who they really were when life tested their love. I've learned that grief isn't always about losing someone who died. Sometimes it's about letting go of someone who's still alive, but no longer safe for your spirit. I never needed to destroy them to feel free. I just needed to stop shrinking myself to fit their comfort. I needed to stop begging for a seat at a table that always pushed me to the edge. And when I finally stood up and walked away, I realized something they never taught me. Peace doesn't come from others doing right by you. It comes from doing right by yourself. No matter how late it arrives, the property still sits in legal limbo. Sometimes I imagine turning it into a quiet retreat for families in crisis, people who were abandoned when they needed someone most. That idea stays with me, not because I want to turn pain into profit, but because I want every brick of my future to mean something more than survival. I want it to echo purpose. This story didn't end with confrontation or collapse. It ended with clarity. And in that clarity, I found something my parents never gave me: the permission to choose my own peace. That's the power they never saw coming. And that's the legacy I'll leave behind, not one of silence out of fear, but silence born from strength.